Which role do you think is the hardest design champions for? I think it's assassins. I think the assassins are some of the hardest characters to design. And it's not because they're like impossible to design, but it's because assassins create extremely emotional, extremely negative feedback when they are doing their jobs. And so it's very hard as a designer when you're designing an assassin, when you get negative feedback on that character, to understand if that negative feedback is like super valid and like, oh my god, actually I'm making something really problematic and it's not fair and I need to fix it and change it, versus if that feedback is just, oh, that person lost to an assassin and it feels bad to lose to assassins, right? And so I think that can be very hard because when you're making an assassin, it can be like really, really hard then to parse the feedback of like, is what I'm doing okay, but just an assassin? Or is what I'm doing actually like really dangerous and could cause some pretty real problems, right? And it's hard to parse those two things apart. A fun story from way back in the day is I was working on Ekko, and you know, Ekko's a mid laner. He turns out he can mid lane, and he's an assassin, and he's really mobile, and you know, really tricky, right? And at the time, I had a designer who is normally very, very level-headed play Ekko. Like this designer, like almost never gets frustrated or mad at anything. Sorry, they didn't play Ekko; they played against Ekko, and they played against Ekko as Vel'Koz. So it was Ekko mid versus Vel'Koz mid, and Ekko mid kind of just trolled all over this Vel'Koz and literally ran circles around him, right? Because it turns out Vel'Koz as a champion, you know, especially when Ekko is playing his game, has a hard time, you know, hitting spells. All of Vel'Koz's spells can miss, especially against a character like Ekko, right? And so after the playtest, I got this designer who's normally very, very level-headed was a little frustrated, and they're like, "Hey, man, like this character you're making is there. It feels like it's kind of messed up. Like it feels like it's like doing too many things, and like you know is like popping off in all these different ways. It seemed kind of unfair." And it was like, heck, well, on one hand, this designer's clearly frustrated, and they're usually not, so that's scary, and that's something I have to worry about. On the other hand, they were playing Vel'Koz against Ekko. and so, you know, after that feedback session, I took some feedback from that and, like, you know, made some changes, but I also had to say to some of the feedback, say, like, hey, actually, I understand this was frustrating, and I understand, like, the feedback, but also, Vel'Koz doesn't have a lot he can do against an assassin like Ekko, just because of the character mismatch, right? And it's like, well, that's hard. Oh my god, Penguin Val! Hey Penguin, how's it going, dude? Looking buff? Yeah, I've been working out so I can be better at Valorant. Penguin, how's Val life? I miss you guys. I want to come playtest again. Val playtests were so fun. Mainly because sometimes I could pop off and beat everybody with my sweet operator skills, and other times I would just lose. It's a good time. But yeah, Penguin, I'm trying to get back to Diamond in League. It's the first time in a long time that I've tried, and it's hard. It's hard. It's hard. I can't. I'm bad. Oh my god, Masala here with the Genshin. Praise. Hey Masala, thanks for the 64 months, dude. It's been forever. Can you do a biceps flex? What, like this? I'm wimp. It's not much. Yeah. So anyways, back to the question. I think assassins are really hard to make. Because it is really, really hard in feedback cycles to determine, is the thing I'm doing really, really messed up and needs pretty major changes, or is the thing I'm doing its job as an assassin, which is to some degree going to be naturally frustrating, right? One of the razors I tend to use for assassin balance, which is has like worked in the past, is if an assassin is not frustrating anyone, meaning that like you have an assassin and you're testing it, and this applies to assassins on live as well, and everybody who plays against it is just like, yeah, that was cool, that was fine, seemed cool to me, that wasn't frustrating at all, right? If an assassin isn't frustrating anyone, it is probably severely underpowered, like actually. And that's not because like, oh, our goal should be to make frustrating characters. It has nothing to do with that. It's mainly just an assassin's core job is to jump on you and kill you really fast, which is an inherently frustrating action. And so if you have an assassin that you see either that you're working on as a designer or you even see on live, and no one's really like, that was frustrating, it could be a very strong indicator that that assassin is having a hard time doing its job. Looking huge. Thank you. It's like making initiators in Val. Is that the hard one in Val, Penguin? Is initiators? Because they initiate and everybody's like, that person initiated on me and that was messed up. But then if they're not good at doing that, like, what do they even do? Yep. Is Eve hard to balance? Why is she underpowered? I don't think Eve's hard to balance. I think we just maybe potentially over-nerfed her slightly in the past. And then this season, things have gotten harder for assassins. And so at the end of the result of that, combination of nerfs and it getting harder for assassins was a character who, you know, was a little weak. Initiators and duelists are probably the hardest, I'd say. I had it easier on Clove, I think. Yeah, no, I feel like duelists would be hard in Valorant. Because I feel Valorant, this is my personal opinion on Valorant duelists. Obviously, I'm just a League designer. But for those of you who don't know in chat, duelists in Valorant are like... They're like the... Dan, how would you explain a duelist? Like, they're like the carries? They're the one who like jumps in and frags, right? Like, they're the they're not the ADCs. What's the comparison for a duelist in Valorant and League? They're the Yasuos. Yeah, that's it. They're the Yasuos. They're the Akalis. They're the Viegos, right? Those are the duelists in Valorant. And so their task is to jump in there, get in there, and frag, right? Just kill everybody. And as you can imagine, being able to do that effectively, you know, takes some tools. And then in Valorant, they have this character called Jett, who's really, really, really good. And she's like a pretty premier, excellent duelist. And so not only does Valorant have the thing of like, how do you make duelists that get in there and, you know, have their tools effectively and get those kills, which would probably be frustrating. But there's also like this character, Jett, who's really good. And then it's like your duelist has to compete with Jett and be like, well, how do I like pop off compared to this other character and things like that. And so I could imagine, I think it can be difficult to design a character like that because it's like when they're popping off, it's going to be like pretty obvious, like to the opposing team. This is actually another thing I run into, and that can be like, you know, frustrating and potentially, again, raise the question of like, is this okay? Another character that League of Legends runs into with this that I think can be hard is characters who can pentakill. In League, if your character is designed to reset and pop off and pentakill, that's another thing where it's like, when they pentakill you, are they doing their job or are they broken? Right? Like, I got a lot of this with Jinx when I was testing her way back in the day. We're talking 12 years ago when we were testing Jinx, is that Jinx has her reset passive, right? And so after any given playtest, if Jinx was doing well, it would usually look like she was the only thing that mattered in the game. Because she'd kill 5 people in a row because that's what her passive does, right? And so it could be hard to tell in any individual game that Jinx was in that she won if Jinx was viable and doing her job, or if she was just completely broken and running over the game, and that's why she was pentakilling all of you, right? Silver Ninja, thank you for the 15 months. Appreciate it. You're also here for over a year.